The rain was relentless, hammering the roof of the old pickup truck as I sat in the passenger seat, heart pounding like it wanted to escape. My brother Jake's friend, Ethan, gripped the wheel, his jaw tight, eyes fixed on the slick road ahead. I'd known him for years, but tonight, something felt different, dangerously different. My name's Lucas, 22, stuck in the suffocating small town of Ashwood, Virginia, where everyone knows your business and nobody forgets your mistakes. I'd been crashing at Jake's place after dropping out of college, trying to figure out what the hell I was doing with my life. Jake, ever the protective older brother, had dragged me along to Ethan's cabin for the weekend, promising it'd be a chance to clear my head. Ethan, with his quiet intensity and those piercing hazel eyes, had always been a mystery to me, a puzzle I couldn't help but want to solve. The truck swerved slightly as Ethan took a sharp turn onto a gravel road, the tires crunching over wet stones. "You okay over there?" he asked, his voice low, almost drowned out by the storm. I nodded, but my stomach twisted. I wasn't okay. Not with the way he'd looked at me when Jake left us alone at the gas station an hour ago, his gaze lingering just a second too long. We pulled up to the cabin, a rustic thing nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains, surrounded by towering pines that swayed in the wind. Jake had stayed back in town for work, leaving just me and Ethan. I grabbed my duffel bag, the weight of it grounding me as we stepped into the rain, sprinting for the porch. Ethan fumbled with the keys, his fingers brushing mine as he handed me a towel from inside. That touch, brief, accidental, sent a jolt through me I couldn't explain. Inside, the cabin smelled of cedar and faintly of smoke from the fireplace Ethan lit with practiced ease. The flames cast flickering shadows on the walls, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this place was too small for whatever was brewing between us. "You want a beer?" Ethan asked, tossing his wet jacket over a chair. His flannel shirt clung to his shoulders, and I forced myself to look away. "Yeah, sure," I mumbled, sitting on the couch, my damp clothes sticking to my skin. He handed me a bottle, his fingers grazing mine again. This time, it didn't feel accidental. My heart stuttered, and I took a long swig, hoping the cold liquid would drown the heat rising in my chest. Ethan sat across from me, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. "So, Lucas," he said, his voice softer now, "you gonna tell me what's got you so wound up? Jake said you've been a mess since you got back." His eyes searched mine, and I felt exposed, like he could see every secret I'd buried deep. I laughed, bitter. "A mess? That's generous." I didn't want to talk about college, or the scholarship I'd lost, or the nights I spent wondering who I even was. But Ethan's gaze didn't waver, and something about it made me want to spill everything. Instead, I deflected. "What about you? You've been Jake's shadow forever, but I barely know you." He smirked, a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Not much to know. I fix cars, hunt, keep to myself." Not exactly thrilling, but there was a weight to his words, a story he wasn't telling. I wanted to push, to ask why he always seemed so guarded. But the fire crackled, and the moment passed. We talked for hours, the beers piling up, the storm raging outside. Ethan's laugh was rare but warm, and every time it slipped out, it chipped away at the walls I'd built. He told me about growing up in Ashwood, about the father who'd never accepted him, about the dreams he'd buried to survive in a town that judged too quickly. I told him about the pressure of being the smart kid, the one everyone expected to escape, and how I'd crumbled under it. By midnight, The air between us was thick with something unspoken. Ethan stood to grab another log for the fire. And when he turned, our eyes locked again. This time, he didn't look away. "Lucas," he said, his voice rough. "Why do you keep looking at me like that?" My breath caught. I didn't know how to answer. Didn't know if I could. But before I could find the words, Ethan crossed the room in 2 strides, stopping inches from me. The heat of his body was overwhelming, and I realized, with a clarity that terrified me, that I wanted him to close the distance. That night, everything crossed the line. The room spun as Ethan stood there, his breath uneven, his eyes burning into mine. I could smell the faint cedar on his skin, mixed with the rain still clinging to him. My heart was a drumbeat, loud and reckless, urging me to move, to say something, anything. "I don't know what you mean," I lied, my voice barely above a whisper. But I did know. Every glance, every accidental touch, had been building to this moment. And now it was here, raw and undeniable. Ethan's hand twitched, like he was fighting the urge to reach out, and I wanted him to lose that fight. He took a step closer, his boots scuffing the wooden floor. "Don't play dumb, Lucas," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. "You feel it too." The words hung heavy, a challenge I wasn't sure I could meet. Ashwood wasn't a place for this for us. It was a town of church suppers and whispered gossip, where people like me learned to hide or leave. I stood, my legs shaky, closing the gap between us. "And if I do?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "What then, Ethan? You know what this place is like." My words were a warning, but they sounded like a plea. I was terrified not of him, but of what this meant, of what I'd been denying for years. Ethan's jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought he'd back off, retreat to the safety of silence. But then his hand was on my arm, firm, grounding, and the world narrowed to that single point of contact. "I'm tired of pretending," he said, his voice breaking. "I've been pretending my whole damn life." Before I could process his words, his lips were on mine, urgent and unyielding. It wasn't gentle, it was desperate, like we'd both been holding our breath for too long. My hands found his shoulders, gripping the damp flannel, pulling him closer. The fire crackled behind us, but it was nothing compared to the heat coursing through me. We stumbled back, crashing onto the couch, a tangle of limbs and need. His hands were everywhere, me hair, my back, my waist, and I matched his urgency, my fingers digging into him like he might disappear if I let go. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt alive, like I wasn't just drifting through my own life. But then, a sharp crack of thunder shook the cabin, and reality slammed into me. I pulled back, breathless, my mind racing. "Ethan, wait," I gasped, my hand still on his chest. "Jake, he can't know." My brother was my anchor, the one person who'd always had my back. If he found out, if he didn't understand, I could lose him. Ethan's eyes darkened, but he nodded, his breath ragged. "I know," he said, his voice thick with something like regret. "But this isn't just tonight. Lucas, you know that, right?" He searched my face, and I saw the same fear I felt, fear of what we'd just unleashed, fear of what it could cost us. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Instead, I kissed him again, softer this time, trying to hold on to the moment before the world could tear it apart. We stayed like that, tangled together, until the fire died down to embers, the storm outside mirroring the one inside me. The next morning, the cabin was too quiet. Ethan was already up, making coffee, acting like nothing had happened. But his eyes gave him away. Every glance was a question, a promise, a risk. I wanted to stay in that moment forever. But the weight of Ashwood, of Jake, of who we were supposed to be, was already creeping in. We didn't talk about it. Not then. We cleaned up, packed the truck, and drove back to town in silence. But as we pulled into Jake's driveway, Ethan's hand brushed mine on the gear shift. Deliberate this time. "This isn't over," he said, his voice barely audible. I nodded, my throat tight, knowing he was right and terrified of what came next. Back in Ashwood, the world felt smaller, tighter, like it was closing in. Jake was waiting on the porch when we pulled up, his grin wide and oblivious. "You too survived the storm," he called, tossing a football into the air. I forced a smile, but my chest ached with the secret I was carrying. Ethan played it cool, joking with Jake like nothing had changed. But I caught the way his eyes flicked to me, quick and guarded. I wanted to scream, to tell Jake everything, to see if he'd still look at me the same. But I couldn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The next few days were torture. Ethan was everywhere fixing Jake's truck, grabbing beers at the local dive, laughing at Jake's dumb jokes. Every time our eyes met, it was like a spark igniting. But we kept our distance, afraid of being caught. Ashwood had eyes everywhere, and rumors spread faster than wildfire. I'd seen what happened to kids who didn't fit the mold: whispers, cold shoulders, or worse. One night, Jake dragged us to a bonfire at the edge of town, a tradition for the 20-somethings stuck in Ashwood. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of cheap beer, laughter echoing over the crackling flames. Ethan sat across the fire, his face half-lit, and I couldn't stop watching him. He caught me staring, and for a moment, the world faded. The chatter, the music, even Jake's voice beside me. "Yo, Lucas, you good?" Jake nudged me, his brow furrowed. I nodded too quickly, my heart racing. "Just tired," I lied, taking a swig of my beer to cover the shake in my hands. Ethan's gaze didn't waver, and I knew we were playing a dangerous game. Later, when Jake was distracted by some old high school buddies, Ethan found me by the edge of the woods, away from the crowd. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low, urgent. He grabbed my wrist, pulling me deeper into the shadows of the trees. My pulse spiked, but I followed. "What are we doing, Ethan?" I whispered, my back against a rough oak trunk. "It's gonna blow up in our faces." My voice cracked, the weight of it all spilling out. I wanted him, more than I'd ever wanted anything, but the fear was suffocating. He stepped closer, his hands framing my face, his thumbs brushing my jaw. "I don't care," he said fiercely. "I've spent years hiding who I am. Lucas, I'm done. I want you, and I'm not letting this town take that away." His words were a lifeline, but they also terrified me. Ashwood didn't forgive, and it didn't forget. Before I could respond, a twig snapped nearby, and we froze. "Lucas." Jake's voice cut through the dark, sharp and suspicious. My stomach dropped. Ethan stepped back, his hands falling to his sides. But it was too late. Jake emerged from the trees, his eyes narrowing as he took in the scene. "Ethan, too close." My face flushed with guilt. "What the hell's going on?" Jake demanded, his voice low. Dangerous. I opened my mouth, but no words came. Ethan stayed silent, his jaw tight, letting me decide. But I was paralyzed, caught between the brother I couldn't lose and the man who'd just set my world on fire. Jake's eyes burned into me, waiting for an answer I didn't have. The bonfire's glow flickered in the distance. But here, in the shadow of the trees, it felt like the world was holding its breath. Lucas, talk, Jake said, his voice sharp, like a blade slicing through the tension. It's nothing, I stammered, my heart hammering so loud I was sure he could hear it. We were just talking. The lie tasted bitter, and Jake's frown deepened. He glanced at Ethan, who stood rigid, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, giving nothing away. Talking, Jake repeated, his tone heavy with doubt. In the middle of the woods. At midnight. He stepped closer, and I saw the hurt in his eyes, the kind that comes from being kept in the dark. Jake had always been my protector, the one who patched me up when life got rough. Now, I was the one hurting him. Jake. I started, but Ethan cut me off. It's my fault, he said, his voice steady but low. I asked him to step away. Needed to talk about personal stuff. He held Jake's gaze, unflinching, but I could see the strain in his shoulders, the effort it took to keep his composure. Jake's eyes flicked between us, searching for the truth. Personal stuff, he said slowly, like he was testing the words. You two have been weird since the cabin. What's going on? Lucas, you're my brother. You don't keep shit from me. The weight of his words crushed me. I wanted to tell him, to rip the bandage off and let the truth bleed out. But the fear of losing him, if losing the only family I had left, kept me silent. It's nothing, I said again, hating myself for it. Let's just go back to the fire. Jake stared at me for a long moment, then shook his head, turning away. Whatever, he muttered, stalking back toward the bonfire. Ethan exhaled, his shoulders sagging. But when he looked at me, his eyes were fierce. We can't keep doing this, he said quietly. Hiding. Lying. It's going to tear us apart before we even get a chance. His words hit hard, because he was right. But the thought of coming clean, of facing Jake's judgment, of facing the whole damn town, made my chest tighten. I need time, I said, my voice barely audible. I'm not ready. Ethan's face softened, but there was pain there, too, like I'd just pushed him away when he'd laid himself bare. Okay, he said finally, his voice tight. But I'm not waiting forever. Lucas. He walked away, leaving me alone in the dark, the weight of my cowardice settling like a stone in my gut. The next week was a blur of avoidance. I dodged Ethan, stayed late at the diner where I picked up shifts, and kept my head down. But Ashwood was too small to hide forever. One night, Ethan showed up at the diner, his truck idling outside as I locked up. Get in, he said through the window, his tone leaving no room for argument. We drove in silence to the edge of town, where the road ended at a quiet overlook. The stars were bright, the air cool, and Ethan's presence beside me was both a comfort and a challenge. I meant what I said, he started, his voice soft but firm. I'm not ashamed of this. Of us. But I can't do this alone. I looked at him, his face half lit by the moonlight, and felt the pull again, that undeniable need to be closer. To be honest, I'm scared. Ethan, I admitted, my voice breaking. What if Jake hates me? What if this town turns on us? He reached for my hand, his grip warm and steady. Then we face it together, he said. But you gotta choose. Lucas. Me. Or the fear. His words were a lifeline, but they also felt like a cliff I wasn't sure I could jump off. The overlook was silent except for the soft hum of crickets and the distant rush of a stream. Ethan's hand in mine was an anchor, but my mind was a storm of doubt and desire. Choosing him meant choosing myself, and I wasn't sure I knew how. I don't know if I'm strong enough, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The admission felt like a betrayal, but it was the truth. Growing up in Ashwood, I'd learned to keep my head down, to blend in, to avoid the whispers that followed anyone who dared to be different. Ethan's grip tightened, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. You are, he said, his voice steady. Certain. You're stronger than you think. Lucas, you've just been carrying everyone else's expectations for too long. His words hit like a punch, because he saw Miralai saw me in a way no one else ever had. I wanted to believe him, wanted to be the person he thought I was. But the fear was a living thing, clawing at my chest. What about Jake? I asked. He's my family. If he can't handle this. Ethan's jaw clenched, but his eyes softened. Jake loves you. He's stubborn, but he's not cruel. You owe him the truth. You owe yourself that. He leaned closer, his forehead almost touching mine. And I'm not going anywhere, no matter what. The weight of his promise settled over me, warm and terrifying. I kissed him then, slow and deliberate, pouring everything I couldn't say into it. It was a moment of courage, fragile but real, and for the first time, I felt like I could face what was coming. The next day, I found Jake at the garage where he and Ethan worked, grease on his hands, a scowl on his face. He'd been distant since the bonfire, and I knew I couldn't keep dodging him. We need to talk, I said, my voice shaking but firm. He wiped his hands on a rag, his eyes wary. About what? You and Ethan sneaking off. You think I'm stupid? Lucas. His tone was sharp, but there was hurt there, too, and it cut deeper than I expected. I took a deep breath, the words I'd rehearsed 100 times spilling out. I'm gay. Jake, I said, my voice breaking. And I have feelings for Ethan. Real feelings. The silence that followed was deafening, his face unreadable as he stared at me. You're serious, he said finally, his voice flat. My best friend. My brother. He shook his head, like he was trying to make sense of it. How long? Since the cabin, I admitted. Maybe longer. I didn't plan this. Jake. I couldn't keep lying. My hands were trembling, but saying it out loud felt like shedding a weight I'd carried for years. Jake's eyes hardened, and he turned away, tossing the rag onto a workbench. I need time, he said, his voice tight. I don't know what to do with this. Lucas. He walked out, leaving me standing alone in the garage, the echo of his words ringing in my ears. That night, I went to Ethan's place, a small apartment above the hardware store. He opened the door, took one look at my face, and pulled me into his arms. You told him, he said. Not a question. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. He held me, his warmth grounding me, and for the first time, I let myself believe we could make this work. Ethan's apartment was a mess of mismatched furniture and car manuals, but it felt like a sanctuary. I sank onto his couch, my head in my hands. the weight of Jake's reaction still crushing me. Ethan sat beside me, close but not touching, giving me space to breathe. He didn't yell. I said finally, my voice hoarse. That's something, right? I tried to laugh, but it came out broken. Ethan's hand found mine, his fingers lacing through, steady and warm. He'll come around, Ethan said, though I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. Jake's not the type to throw family away. He just needs to process. He squeezed my hand, his eyes searching mine. You did something brave today, Lucas. Don't forget that. Brave. The word felt foreign, but it sparked something in me, a flicker of hope. Maybe. Or defiance. I leaned into him, resting my head against his shoulder, letting his presence anchor me. What if he doesn't? I whispered. What if I just lost my brother? Ethan's arm wrapped around me, pulling me closer. Then you've still got me, he said, his voice fierce. And we'll figure it out. Together. His words were a promise, one I clung to as the world outside felt like it was crumbling. The next few days were a tightrope walk. Jake avoided me, picking up extra shifts at the garage, leaving texts unanswered. I kept busy at the diner, but every quiet moment brought the ache of his absence. Ethan was my lifeline, stealing moments with me when he could, quick coffees, late-night drives, stolen kisses in the shadows. But Ashwood was watching, and the whispers were starting. One afternoon, I overheard two regulars at the diner, their voices low but sharp. Jake's brother and that mechanic. Never would have pegged them for it. The word stung, but worse was the pity in their tone, like we were something to be fixed. I wanted to confront them, to tell them to mind their own business. But fear kept me quiet. Ethan wasn't as restrained. When a coworker at the garage made a snide comment, he shut it down hard, his voice cold and unyielding. Say it again, and you'll be looking for a new job, he'd said, loud enough for the whole shop to hear. Word spread, and so did the tension. Ashwood was a small town, and small towns didn't forget. One night, Ethan took me to the cabin again, a desperate attempt to escape the suffocating judgment. We sat by the fire, the same one that had witnessed our first crossing of the line. I'm tired of hiding, Ethan said, his voice raw. I want to walk down Main Street with you. Lucas, I want to stop pretending. His words lit something in me, a fire I hadn't known I had. Then let's do it, I said, surprising myself. No more shadows. No more lies. Ethan's eyes widened, then softened, a slow smile spreading across his face. He kissed me, deep and certain, and for the first time, I felt like we could take on the world. But the world wasn't ready. The next day, someone spray-painted a slur on Ethan's truck, bold and ugly in the morning light. My stomach churned as I watched him scrub it off, his face a mask of quiet rage. This is what I was afraid of, I said, my voice shaking. This town'll never let us be. Ethan stopped scrubbing, turning to me, his eyes fierce. Then we make them, he said. We don't run. We don't hide. We fight for this. Lucas. For us. His words were a call to arms, and I realized I was ready to answer. The paint came off Ethan's truck, but the stain of that word lingered in my mind, a reminder of what we were up against. Ashwood wasn't just a place, it was a mindset, one that didn't take kindly to change. But Ethan's resolve was contagious, and I was done letting fear call the shots. We decided to stop hiding. No grand gestures, just small, deliberate steps. holding hands in the diner parking lot, sitting close at the bar, shoulders brushing. Every touch was a statement, a quiet rebellion against the eyes that followed us. Some people stared, some whispered, but others more than I expected didn't care. A waitress at the diner gave us a knowing smile. An old classmate clapped Ethan on the shoulder. No questions asked. It wasn't acceptance. Not yet. But it was a start. Jake was another story. He hadn't spoken to me since the garage, and the silence was a wound that wouldn't heal. I missed him, his dumb jokes, his steady presence, the way he'd always known when I needed him. I kept hoping he'd show up, say something, anything. But days turned into a week, and the distance grew. One evening, I found him at the old baseball field, sitting alone in the bleachers, a beer in his hand. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and I took a deep breath before climbing up to sit beside him. He didn't look at me, just stared out at the empty field. "I'm sorry," I said, the words spilling out. "I didn't want to hurt you, Jake. I couldn't keep lying about who I am." My voice cracked, and I hated how small it made me feel. He took a long sip of his beer, his jaw tight. "You think I'm mad because you're gay?" he said finally, his voice low. "I'm not. I'm mad because you didn't trust me, Lucas. You and Ethan sneaking around, lying to my face. I thought we were closer than that." His words hit like a slap, because he was right. I'd been so scared of losing him that I'd pushed him away myself. I was afraid. I admitted. "I didn't know if you'd still see me the same." Jake turned to me then, his eyes softer but still guarded. "You're my brother," he said. "That doesn't change. But I need time. Okay. It's a lot." He stood, leaving the beer bottle on the bleacher, and walked away. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something, and I clung to it. That night, I told Ethan everything, my voice shaking as I recounted Jake's words. He listened, his hand resting on my knee, his presence steady. "He'll come around," he said again, and this time, I believed him. We were building something real, something worth fighting for, and I wasn't going to let fear win. But Ashwood had other plans. The next morning, Ethan's boss at the garage called him in, his voice cold over the phone. "We're getting complaints," he said. "Customers don't like the distraction. You need to keep your personal life out of work." It wasn't a firing. Not yet. But it was a warning, and it lit a fire in Ethan's eyes. "We're not backing down," he told me later, his voice fierce. "They want to push us out. Let them try." I nodded, my heart swelling with pride and fear. We were in this together, but the cost was becoming clear, and I wondered how much we could take. The weeks that followed were a battle, quiet but relentless. Ethan and I refused to hide, walking through Ashwood with our heads high, hands clasped, daring the town to push back. Some did snide comments, cold stares, a brick through Ethan's apartment window one night. But others stood with us, their support small but fierce, like the diner owner who banned a customer for spitting slurs, or the librarian who slipped me a book on queer history with a quiet nod. Jake was still distant, but he started texting again, short, gruff messages about work or the weather. Nothing deep, but enough to keep the door open. I held on to that, hoping time would bridge the gap. Ethan and I leaned on each other, our bond growing stronger with every challenge. We spent nights at the cabin, planning a future that felt possible, maybe leaving Ashwood, maybe staying and fighting. Wherever we went, It would be together. One night, everything came to a head. The annual town fair was in full swing. Lights twinkling. The air thick with the smell of fried dough and cotton candy. Ethan and I went, determined to claim our place. We walked through the crowd, fingers intertwined, ignoring the whispers. Then we saw Jake, standing by the Ferris wheel, his eyes locked on us. He approached, his expression unreadable, and my heart sank. I braced for the worst, but he stopped in front of us, his hands in his pockets. "You two are stubborn as hell," he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. I'm not there yet. But I'm trying. Lucas, I don't want to lose you." Tears stung my eyes, and I nodded, unable to speak. Ethan squeezed my hand, his own eyes shining. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. And in that moment, it was enough. The fair continued around us, laughter and music filling the air. But for me, the world was just the three of us, Jake, Ethan, and me standing on the edge of something new. Ashwood wasn't ready for us. Not entirely. But we were carving out a space, proving that love could be louder than hate. Years later, I'd look back on that night as the turning point. Ethan and I stayed in Ashwood, not because it was easy, but because it was ours. We built a life messy, imperfect, but ours. Jake came around, slowly, his loyalty stronger than his doubts. The town changed, too, little by little, as others saw us and dared to be themselves. That night at the cabin, when everything crossed the line, wasn't just a moment of passion. It was the start of a fight for love, for truth, for a place to belong. And in the end, we won. Not because we were fearless, but because we chose each other. Every single day.